The following is a paid presentation for Divine Faith Ministries International, brought to you by the viewers of the Soaring with Eagles broadcast. This program does not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of this broadcast network.
Welcome to the Soaring with Eagles broadcast. I'm Bishop Donald E. Battle. I'm excited about today. You know, the sun is out, it's getting to be spring, and hey, I'm ready for some new things. Something good is about to happen to you. It won't be long now. Things are turning around for you. I can feel it. Make sure you stay tuned for this entire broadcast. It's going to change your life forever.
Today on Soaring with Eagles with Bishop Donald Battle.
You know, today's broadcast is about a subject I think I qualify to speak about. You know, sometimes you're ministering on things from just your learning and teaching, but I was raised in a single parent home. Those you don't know, I was raised in the housing development or housing projects or whatever you want to call them in Fairfield, a suburb of Birmingham. A mother who had 8 kids in her home. I have seen the toughest of times, but here I am today, who I am, and I saw crime, I saw things that were wrong, but I don't think your life is set up to be a failure just because you're in a single parent home. I think mamas can do just as much as a husband and wife with God on your side and with Jesus with you. You know, Jeremiah chapter 1 talks about, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nation. So God knew you before you came here. So whether or not you came and you were a product of a great family and some suburban place, or whether or not you were born in some hut in some place called Africa or whatever, or whether or not you was raised in the projects or whatever, I think God has a plan for everybody. And I believe that you can raise your children in the most unusual, hardest places and still get the fruit of what you want in life. My mother was the man and the woman of that house. She was tough. You have to be. When you got kids in an environment like that, I had to get home. We used to say when the street lights come on. She dealt with us. And she demanded. And some stuff she couldn't keep up with 8 kids. And, you know, some of the stuff I had to learn from the people that in the community. I was raised in a community that would parent you. You know, up the street, Mrs. Barnhart and others would see us doing things, and of course we could be corrected by them. But I want to empower you today that I actually feel some ways I had an advantage of being raised by a single mom. I had to be the man a lot quicker. I became the man of the house. I was the one that took the money and got on a bus and went downtown at 12 and 13 paid bills. I was the one that made sure the grass was cut when we finally moved out the projects into one of those governmental upstart homes. And a particular man stayed next door to us before we moved into the projects, and he kind of became a mentor for me. You know, it was good to be around people who wouldn't hurt you. You know, now there's a lot of people out there, pedophiles and people looking for children to destroy them. And I'm sure it was some then, but I was fortunate to be around people that didn't hurt me. This man took me and he showed me how to make things, fix the lawnmower. I remember he was a little getting up in age. Maybe he was in his 50s, late 60s or something. But he took me to the country where he had a farm. And I decided that then that I was going to go to school. He got me up at 5 in the morning, and we was, I think, pulling potatoes out the ground or something, and eating watermelon and bologna for lunch. And I said, boy, I'm gonna go to school. And you know, he showed me what a man was. And I think sometimes, you know, you do have to watch your children. I think you ought to monitor where they sleep when they're going over your relative's house. You got to know that sometimes the violations will come with family members when a child is vulnerable. And some of those kids don't ever get over those things. But I believe with Jesus, you can make it through anything. So I have a lady here, she's going to share with you some things she's been through as a mom and how life threw her a bad hand for a moment. But I still believe all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. And I believe your children and you're going to do well. My mom now has a doctor out of that 8 kids. My sister, who's going to be with the Lord, was a registered nurse. One of my sisters is a stockbroker, doing very well. Got another sister that travels the country for an Asian company. She's a buyer. I got others in my family that are doing well. We all live here in Atlanta now. And so watch this. This is going to help you.
Coming up next.
I always knew he needed a male figure in his life. And I always wanted him to have a male figure. Now my mind has changed on that. But I felt like at that time, he needed to have a positive male figure in his life. And therefore, I reached out to whom I thought was a pastor and who was labeled as a pastor and who was known as a pastor to help mentor my son. And it didn't turn out the way it should have.
There is a generation that is rising with a heart after God and His presence. A movement is being formed at the Divine Faith McDonough campus, and it's one you don't want to miss. Join the Faith Revolutionaries, a young adult service every Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Your generation, your culture, your church.
I have a son who is 17. He turned 17 this past April. And I divorced their dad when he was about 3. And therefore, he never had a father completely in his life growing up. His dad said, if you wanted me to be a father, you would never divorce me. But we divorced due to domestic violence. And I always knew he needed a male figure in his life. And I always wanted him to have a male figure. Now my mind has changed on that. But I felt like at that time, he needed to have a positive male figure in his life. And therefore, I reached out to whom I thought was a pastor and who was labeled as a pastor and who was known as a pastor to help mentor my son. And it didn't turn out the way it should have. In 2014, there was a pastor that I knew in North Carolina, and he asked if he could mentor my son. He didn't have his own church, but he had a huge following. And I agreed that he could actually mentor my child. He had a mime camp / praise dance camp. And a lot of young men and women went there. A ton of young men and women. So I agreed, sure, you can mentor my son. My son loved to mime and praise dance since he was a little kid. So I agreed, and at the time my son was 14. He would come and pick him up, take him to different practices, take him to different places they had to mime, a couple of well-known churches for a lot of big name pastors. And at first I thought it was a good thing. I thought, yes, my son is getting the exposure. I always thought he was gifted in mime, even in preaching when he was a kid. he would get the Bible and put on shoes and do the shouting. And I thought it was actually a good thing. And then he had also started hanging with the wrong crowd. So I felt like having this pastor to mentor him would be a great thing. However, he started taking advantage of that. The pastor did. He would get offended, or I guess you could say upset, when I wouldn't let him take my son with him. And I started thinking that was really weird, because you're not his father, you're not a relative, and if I tell you, no, you can't take my child today, because we have family plans, he would get really upset with me about that. And so I started telling him he couldn't be around my son anymore, because I was uncomfortable with the relationship him and my son was having. I moved to Georgia in February 2015, and in December of 2014, I moved to Georgia. In February, March, I noticed my son started acting out at school a lot. He started getting into a lot of trouble again, and I thought it was due to our new environment, new friends. However, it wasn't until May my son went missing, and he came home one day. He had got in trouble at school, and this was after a couple of repeated getting in trouble. He came home from school, and I told him he was on punishment. I said, go to your room, you're on punishment. Tomorrow we're going to talk to a counselor. We're going to find somebody, because something is not right. You're acting out a lot. He went to the room. I called my sister, and about 10 minutes later, my youngest daughter came in the room and said that my son had left. And I said, what do you mean he left? She said he hugged me and he said goodbye. And he walked out the door. And my oldest daughter, who's about a year and a half older than him, we went around the neighborhood, searched for him, couldn't find him anywhere. And he was gone for about 8 weeks. It was like he vanished. No idea, no contact. And my heart dropped. I was devastated because I had no idea. And at the time I was working as an executive assistant in Austell, Georgia, and I still had to go to work every day and be the provider, but I had no idea where my son was. And I didn't want to tell my employers, I didn't want to tell people I work with. On weekends and on evenings, I was posting flyers everywhere. We had him listed with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I had to act like every day when I went to work, I had to have the smile on my face. And eventually, my coworkers, they started following me on Facebook, and they started seeing all my posts. And then they came to my cubicle one day. It was like, you have a son that's missing? And you act like this every day. You smile, you come to work. And it was like, at that moment, I just started crying, because it was a separation. Excuse me. It was a separation, because I have learned, even as a child, to compartmentalize different things in my life. So I know if I'm going through this, I can push this back and I can just deal with this. If I'm here, I can push this back and I can deal with this. So when I went to work, it was like an escape. I didn't have to focus on, I was the mom of a missing son. It was, I was a provider, and let me just go to work. So when they started finding out that he was missing, even though I wore a yellow ribbon to work every day for my son, they just thought it was a ribbon that I wore for a call. Nobody never asked. Excuse me. So after about 8 weeks of him being missing, my daughter was turning 16, so her 16th birthday. And she wanted to have this huge party in North Carolina. And I agreed, and we had posted that I was giving her a birthday party in North Carolina. And, it's her 16th birthday. Despite everything that's going on, I wanted to celebrate for her. We had to have still some form of a normal life. And it was on that morning that my son called me. And you could tell in his voice, he was really shaky, didn't really want to talk. But he was like, I am okay. He said, but I heard you was going to be in North Carolina. He was like, Mama, where are you going to be? I need to know where you're going to be. So we told him where we were going to be. And I told him, I don't want to know where he's at, but if there's any way he can get to where I'm at, please come. Probably an hour into the party, I kept looking out the door, he ended up walking from the side of the street, like going around toward the building that I had rented for my daughter. And he showed up. He was so small, looked so different. And my daughters and I ran outside and we just hugged him, and I didn't want to let him go. And I took him around the back of the building, and I told him, I said, I need to call the police. Everybody's looking for you. Every state is looking for you. And he agreed. He said, but can we please have a party and do it afterwards? But he had a little track phone with him. And the phone kept ringing. And every time it rung, I saw him jump. He was so nervous. And I told my girlfriend and my cousin that was there at the party, I said, I know that's the man that has him. And I knew it was the pastor, the so-called pastor. And I say that because even he went missing around the time my son went missing. Nobody seen him. Nobody had talked. And this was a man who was all over social media everywhere, that was miming everywhere. And a couple of people was messaging me saying, I think I seen your son with this pastor. And after the party was over, we ended up calling the police. The police met us at the hotel that we were staying in North Carolina. They completely just came flying from everywhere, probably 4 or 5 police cars. And they told my son, we've been looking for you for weeks now. And they got my son, they put him in a car, and they took him to the police department. And I followed them there. But they told me because he was initially listed as a runaway, that they had to be the one to transport him back to Georgia. I couldn't do it, which meant he had to stay overnight in North Carolina. But they did transport him back. We immediately went before the courts. I told them I didn't feel safe with my son being out. I was worried. I knew something had happened. My son didn't want to press charges. He told us he was with the pastor, but he didn't want to press any type of charges. He begged me not to have him arrested, because my son was a football player and a basketball player. And I think he was more afraid of the stigmatism of all his friends knowing that this man had him, and what they would say and the questions his friends would ask. So reluctantly, I agreed that we wouldn't go out the charges, but we did set forth a restraining order. The judge initiated the restraining order.
Job 14:1 says that the days of man are few and full of trouble, but you don't have to allow those troubles to trouble you. In this message, Bishop Battle teaches on the principle of how to take lemons and make lemonade. You are not stuck in the place of your disappointment. God can take an impossible situation and cause it to work together for your good. Order your copy of From Lemons to Lemonade today.
So the way it was set up was he was going to counseling to an outpatient facility. Let me back up. They didn't want him in public school because of his structure that he had to be under now. They put an ankle monitor on him for 3 months so we can watch his everyday actions, where he goes, his comings, all of that stuff. They put the ankle monitor on him, but he was going to a school for kids, for not so much for troubled kids, but for kids who have been through experiences. He was going from 7:30 to 11:30 in the morning, which means I had to quit my job because I had to take him and I had to pick him up. So he went from 7:30 to 11:30. He had a court-appointed mentor that was a pastor to pick him up from 12:30 to 1:30. They came to our house, mentored him, and then from 2 to 8. He was at this outpatient therapy, and that was Monday through Friday. That was his structure. And everything started seeming good toward the end of 2015. Everything started seeming really good until February of 2016. He got up, as we normally do. I woke up as I normally do to get my kids ready for school. Things were great. He didn't have a cell phone. At least that's what I thought at the time. The counselors and I all agreed he didn't need a cell phone because we was afraid of the communication with him and the pastor by us not pressing charges. I went to go wake him up, and when I went in his room, he wasn't in his room. and which wasn't strange because of what happened to him the previous year and the 8 weeks he was missing. There was times I would wake up and he'd be on the floor in my room sleep. He'd be in his sister's room sleep. He might be in the living room. So it wasn't a strange thing not to find him in his room. But his music was turned all the way up. The TV was turned all the way up in his room. So I came out, I went in his sister's room, I didn't see him anywhere. And I woke her up. I said, "Where's your brother?" She was like, "I don't know." And it's like 6:30 in the morning. I run back in my room, I look, I didn't see him anywhere. I woke up my other daughter, I said, "Where's your brother?" She was like, "I don't know, Ma, I thought he was here." And we all just started like panicking. And my oldest daughter yelled, "Ma, come back in the room." And I ran to his room and everything was gone. I mean, not even a hanger, not a sock, not a shoe. He had posters all around his wall. Every poster was gone. Even his cover on his bed was gone. The only thing was the fitted sheet was the only thing on the bed. And I stood there for a minute and I knew right then the pastor had him again. And I called his counselor. I called the probation officer that was working with him, when he first came home. I called everybody I can think of, and we typed in the pastor's name on social media, and it was gone. It said it could not on Instagram, not on Facebook, nowhere. We knew right then he had him again. We immediately contacted the National Center for Missing Kids again. They put his stuff back out, sent the flyers out immediately. He was gone this time for 10 weeks. Complete vanishing. And him and the pastor. And it was like no one had seen him. The police had kept going to his house, the pastor's house, his family house. Everyone said they hadn't seen him. They had no idea. I can honestly say the first time it happened, my mom is a pastor. Half of my family are pastors or ministers. And actually, I was ordained as a pastor in 2012. As a minister in 2012. But because of the situation, the things that happened, when it happened the first time to my son, I pulled away from God. I pulled away from church. I pulled away from it. I was so hurt and devastated because I was like, God, as much as I love you, as much as I serve you, as much as I do, and then at my church in North Carolina, I was one of the lead security members over my leaders. And I was like, I was a servant to you for so long, and then this has happened to my child. And despite the things that have happened to me, I'm grown, I can handle it. Again, I can handle it. But this is a child. Like, his whole life would be affected from these things. He might not can handle things like I've been able to handle it in my life. And so I pulled away from God. And the second time, I was really through. Like, I probably cursed God in all type of ways. And then I had to stop because my mom is a minister, and it was days that I called her and I would be crying my eyes out, and I would say, Mom, why would God do this? Why would God allow this? Why would he do this? Like, this is my son, and I could see the purpose in his life. Why would he allow Satan to come in and try to destroy that purpose or confuse my son to make him think that he would not grow up to be a man, a manly man? And, I had to really redirect. And no matter what my mom said, or even my leaders at home, my church leaders at home, or anything back home, I had to come to peace with it for myself. I had to talk to God for me and get back into a place where I knew that my son would have a testimony, no matter what, at the end of the day. And then I had to stop and also look at it as, when he went through this, because I was so hurt by everything that had happened, I made a long YouTube video, and I put it out on Facebook and YouTube about this pastor. And I kind of had to expose my son to do it, And even though I got some criticism, probably 20%, 80% were people supporting me. And then it made a lot of people come out and say, thank you for being the woman that you are, because this man did this to me when I was 12. Or this man did this to me when I was going to his mom camp, but I was scared to come out. So then I had to stop and say, well, God, maybe you allowed this to happen to my child because I'm the only mother that voiced my opinion, that exposed this man for who he is. Even if it meant exposing my son, it exposed this man, and it helped all these other people to come out. Because when I went to court for the pastor's first appearance in court, I posted that I was going, and about 6 people showed up that he did that too. And they spoke to the DA. And they told him, hey, this really happened to her son because this happened to me. He did this to me. How I keep going now is God. How I keep going now. Because there are days that I get weak. There are days I cry. There are days when I go see my son that I just hug him and I hate to leave him. And I think about the football games I used to watch him at, the birthday parties he's been to. I think about all the family functions he's missing now, even just the regular days that he's missing from being with his family. But what keeps me going is that his story, and knowing that his circumstances is what's going to help bless a lot of people. No matter if he's looking at it as a bad situation now, and I'm looking at it as a bad situation now, even when I still have to go to court. We have so many court dates coming up because it's a federal case. But I look at it now and this is going to help a lot of kids. It's going to help a lot of adults. Because even in talking with my son, as he questioned his sexuality now because of the long-term things that happen, the weeks of things that happen to him, I look at so many young men and even young women that question their sexuality. It's because of things like this that has happened in their life. It's not because they woke up and say, oh, I want to be like this. A lot of them is because of situations. So my grounding now is God. It's only God. That's what gives me peace every day. When I wake up and I feel like I'm going crazy, or when I know I have to take this 6-hour drive to go to court, I pray all the way there. I prepare my mind for God. I have to face this man. I got to look at this man that hurt my son. And even though the devil on his shoulder saying, get him, the angel on his shoulder said, I got him. Don't worry, I got him.
Thank you for watching the Soaring with Eagles broadcast. We pray that you were inspired, uplifted, and encouraged. Stay connected with us via social media, our website, or by phone. And remember, the best is yet to come.